Chapter 47. Man, after death, is in a complete human form. It can be confirmed from things already shown in several previous sections that the form of the spirit of man is the human form. That is, that the spirit is a man even in form, especially where it is shown that every angel is in a complete human form. That in respect of his interiors, every man is a spirit, and that the angels in heaven are from the human race. This can be seen still more clearly from the fact that it is by virtue of his spirit, and not by virtue of his body, that man is a man, and that the corporeal form is added to the spirit in accordance with the spirit's form, and not the reverse. For it is in accordance with its own form that the spirit is clothed with a body. Consequently, the spirit of man acts into every part of the body, even the minutest, insomuch that if any part is not actuated by the spirit, or the spirit is not active in it, it does not live. Everyone can know that this is true from this fact alone, that thought and will actuate all things and each thing of the body with such entire command that everything concurs. And anything that does not concur is not a part of the body, but is cast out as something without life. And thought and will belong not to the body, but to the spirit of man. A spirit is not visible in the human form to man after it has been loosed from the body, nor does he see the spirit in another man, because the body's organ of sight, or its eye, so far as it sees in the world, is a material organ. And what is material can see only what is material, while what is spiritual sees what is spiritual. When therefore the material part of the eye becomes darkened and is deprived of its cooperation with the spiritual, then the spirits appear in their own form, which is the human form. Not only the spirits who are in the spiritual world, but also the spirit of another man while it is yet in its body. The form of the spirit is the human form, because man, in respect of his spirit, has been created into the form of heaven. For all things of heaven and of the order of heaven have been brought together in the things that constitute the mind of man. And from this comes his capacity to receive intelligence and wisdom. Whether you say the capacity to receive intelligence and wisdom, or the capacity to receive heaven, it is the same thing, as can be confirmed from the things shown about the light and heat of heaven, the form of heaven, the wisdom of angels, and in the section that the form of heaven as a whole and in part resembles a single man. And this by virtue of the Lord's divine human, from which is heaven and its form. Those things which have now been said can be understood by the rational man, for he can see it from the connection of causes and from truths in their order. But it is not understood by a man who is not rational, and for several reasons, the chief of which is that he has no desire to understand them, because they are opposed to his falsities, which make his truths. And he who is unwilling to understand for this reason has closed to his rational the way to heaven, although that way can still be opened if only the will does not resist. That man is able to understand truths and be rational whenever he so wishes has been shown to me by much experience. Evil spirits who have become irrational in the world by rejecting the divine and the truths of the Church and confirming themselves against them have quite often been turned by divine power towards those who were in the light of truth. And they have then comprehended all things as the angels do, and have acknowledged them to be true, and also that they comprehended them all. But the moment these spirits relapsed into themselves and turned back to the love of their will, they understood nothing and affirmed the opposite. I have even heard certain dwellers in hell say that they knew and perceived that which they did to be evil, and that which they thought to be false, but that they were unable to resist the delight of their love, that is, their will, and that it is their will that drives their thought to see evil as good and falsity as truth. Hence, it was clear that those who are in falsity from evil can understand and therefore be rational, but have no wish to do so. And they have no wish for the reason that they have loved falsities more than truths, because these agree with the evils in which they were. To love and to will is the same thing. For what a man wills, he loves, and what he loves, he wills. Because the state of men is such that they are able to understand truths if they wish to, I have been permitted to confirm spiritual truths, which are truths of heaven and the Church, even by reasonings. And this in order that the falsities by which the rational in many has been closed up may be dispersed by reasonings, and thus the eye may perhaps in some degree be opened. For to confirm spiritual truths by rational truths is permitted to all who are in truths. Who could ever understand the word from the sense of its letter unless he saw the truths there from an enlightened rational? Is not this the source of so many heresies from the same word? That the spirit of man, when it has been loosed from the body, is still a man, and in a like form, has been proved to me by the daily experience of many years. For 1,000 times I have seen such, and have heard them and talked with them even about this fact, that men in the world do not believe them to be men, and that those who do believe this are regarded by the learned as simple. Spirits are grieved at heart that such ignorance still persists in the world, and above all within the Church. But this belief, they said, had emanated chiefly from the learned, who had thought about the soul from the corporeal sensual. And from such ideas, the only conception they formed of the soul was as being mere thought. And when this is regarded apart from any subject in and from which it exists, it is merely a fleeting breath of pure ether that must needs be dissipated when the body dies. But as the Church believes from the Word in the immortality of the soul, they are compelled to ascribe to it something vital, such as pertains to thought. But they deny to it anything of sense, such as man possesses, until it is again been joined to the body. On this opinion, the doctrine in regard to the resurrection is based. with the belief that the soul and body will be joined again when the last judgment comes. For this reason, when anyone thinks about the soul in accordance with this doctrine and these conjectures, he cannot at all grasp the fact that it is a spirit and in a human form. And still further, scarcely anyone at this day knows what the spiritual is, and still less that spiritual beings, as all spirits and angels are, have any human form. Consequently, nearly all who come from the world are greatly surprised that they were alive, and are as much men as before, that they see, hear, and speak, and that their body enjoys the sense of touch as before, with no difference whatsoever. And when they cease to be astonished at themselves, then they are astonished that the Church should know nothing about this state of men after death, thus nothing about heaven and hell, when in fact all who have ever lived in the world are in the other life and live as men. And as they wondered also why this had not been disclosed to man by visions, being an essential of the faith of the Church, they were told from heaven that although this might have been done, since nothing is easier when it is the Lord's good pleasure, yet those who have confirmed themselves in the opposite falsities would not believe even if they themselves should behold it. Also, that there is danger in confirming anything by visions with men who are in falsities. For they would then first believe and afterwards deny, and thus would profane the truth itself. For it is profanation to believe and then to deny. And those who profane truths are cast down into the lowest and most grievous of all the hells. This danger is what is meant by the Lord's words. He hath blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, lest they should see with their eyes and understand with their heart, and should turn, and I should heal them. And that those who are in falsities would not believe, even if visions were given, is meant by these words. Abraham said to the rich man in hell, "They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them." But he said, "Nay, Father Abraham, but if one came to them from the dead, they would be converted." But Abraham said to him, "If they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they believe, though one should rise from the dead." When the spirit of man first enters the world of spirits, which takes place shortly after his resuscitation, as described above, his face and his tone of voice resemble those he had in the world, because he is then in the state of his exteriors, and his interiors are not as yet uncovered. This is man's first state after death. But subsequently his face is changed and becomes entirely different, resembling his ruling affection or ruling love, in conformity with which the interiors of his mind had been while he was in the world, and his spirit while it was in the body. For the face of a man's spirit differs greatly from the face of his body. The face of his body is from his parents, but the face of his spirit is from his affection, and is an image of it. The spirit comes into this affection after life in the body, and then exterior things are done away with, and interior things are uncovered. This is man's second state. I have seen some who had recently arrived from the world, and have recognized them from their face and speech, but seeing them afterwards, I did not recognize them. Those who had been in good affections appeared with beautiful faces, but those who had been in evil affections with misshapen faces. For man's spirit, viewed in itself, is nothing but his affection, and the face is its outward form. Another reason why faces are changed is that in the other life no one is permitted to counterfeit affections that are not his own, and thus assume looks that are contrary to his love. All in the other life are brought into such a state as to speak as they think, and to manifest in their looks and gestures the inclinations of their will. And because of this, the faces of all become forms and images of their affections. And in consequence, all who have known each other in the world know each other in the world of spirits, but not in heaven, nor in hell. The faces of hypocrites are changed later than those of others, because by practice they had formed a habit of so managing their interiors as to imitate good affections. Consequently, for a long time they appear not unbeautiful. But as that which they had assumed is gradually put off, and the interiors of the mind are brought into accord with the form of their affections, they become, after a while, more misshapen than others. Hypocrites are such as have been accustomed to talk like angels, but interiorly have acknowledged nature alone and not the divine, and have therefore denied the things of the church and of heaven. It is to be known that everyone's human form after death is the more beautiful in proportion as he has more interiorly loved divine truths and lived according to them. For everyone's interiors are opened and formed in accordance with his love and life. Therefore, the more interior the affection is, the more like heaven it is, and in consequence the more beautiful the face is. This is why the angels in the inmost heaven are the most beautiful, for they are forms of celestial love. But those who have loved divine truths more exteriorly, and thus have lived in accordance with them in a more external way, are less beautiful. For exterior affections only shine forth from their faces, and through these no interior heavenly love shines. Consequently, nothing of the form of heaven as it is in itself. There is seen in the faces of such something comparatively obscure, not vivified by anything of interior life shining through it. In a word, all perfection increases towards interiors and decreases towards exteriors. And as perfection increases and decreases, so does beauty. I have seen angelic faces of the third heaven of such radiance that no painter with all his art could possibly give any such light to his colours as to equal 1,000th part of the brightness and life that shone forth from their countenances. But the faces of the angels of the lowest heaven may in some measure be equalled. In conclusion, I would mention a certain arcanum hitherto unknown to anyone, namely that every good and truth that goes forth from the Lord and makes heaven is in the human form. And this not only as a whole and in what is greatest, but also in every part and in what is least. Also that this form affects everyone who receives good and truth from the Lord, and causes everyone who is in heaven to be in the human form, in accordance with the reception. It is in consequence of this that heaven is like itself in general and in particular, and that the human form is the form of the whole, of every society and of every angel. To which this must be added, that it is the form of the least things of thought derived from heavenly love with the angels. This arcanum, however, falls with difficulty into the understanding of any man, but clearly into the understanding of angels, because they are in the light of heaven.